Welcome back to the Linux Academy NGINX Deep Dive. In this video, we're going to address one of the common questions that you kind of run into when you're looking at a web server to use, and that is NGINX versus Apache. Apache has been around for a very long time, and it is used on a lot of very high-profile sites, so how do you know which one is which, and what are they going to do a little bit better? We're going to go through some points here and see how NGINX does it versus how Apache does it, how they kind of relate. And what you're going to find is that they're overall pretty simple. When it comes to configuration, NGINX uses its own custom configuration language that is directive-based. And when I say directive-based, it's really you have a keyword, and then that keyword has some arguments. So it works very much like a function. Apache works in the same way. It is also a directive-based language. You're going to have slightly different things to break up your contexts of things. So if you have blocks of configuration in Apache, they go into what kind of looks like XML tags. And in NGINX, you're going to use squiggly braces in order to separate those. But the overall configuration is relatively similar. NGINX comes with one processing method. And remember, it was built to solve a very specific problem, and that was handling a lot of concurrent requests. So that's the only way it knows how to process requests, is in a way that could support a lot of concurrent ones. Apache, on the other hand, has been around for a very long time, and it has multiple processing methods that you can choose from. Prefork being the original one. There's a worker method that spins up separate processes and threads. And then there's an event method, which basically works like worker, except for it is utilized more for keep alive connections. NGINX, on the other hand, uses a worker process model, but then it has threads that go off and actually handle things, but they're only ever triggered by events. So that allows it to work in a very asynchronous way, which is one of the things that helps NGINX get its massive amount of concurrent performance. Both NGINX and Apache can be extended using third-party modules that can be dynamic. And when we say dynamic, I mean that you don't have to recompile NGINX or Apache in order to use them. These have existed in Apache forever, but NGINX, they're a relatively recent addition, and we're going to use a few of these as we go through this course. When it comes to dynamic content, or acting as a reverse proxy to some backend servers, NGINX and Apache have roughly the same performance in terms of actually how fast a single request is going to be resolved. When we're not working with dynamic content, we will be working with static files, and this is actually an area where you're going to find a distinct difference between the two of them. And with that, NGINX is very, very performant when it comes to serving static files. This is one of the things that also makes it really good as a cache. It's comfortable serving static files, and if you can tell it some dynamic content to make it static essentially in a cache, then you can get a lot of performance gains there. Apache is just slower when they're benchmarked side by side serving the same static content. So if you do have a heavily static site, then I would definitely recommend NGINX over Apache. One thing to consider is that NGINX has no concept of an htaccess file if you're familiar with Apache. If you're not familiar with Apache, an htaccess file is a file that you can use to specify configuration based on a subdirectory rather than having global configuration for how things can be accessed. And when you look at this list, you can see that overall they're about the same. They can do a lot of the same things. And it's really in the details and kind of the underpinnings that you're going to find the differences. And when it comes to getting the most out of hardware, NGINX is going to be the best one for the job in that case. It's very performant on lower end hardware because it's just a very lightweight tool. It needs fewer resources in order to get things done. And its processing model is one of the reasons that it is so performant in that way. So that's going to be probably the biggest difference that we're going to run into between NGINX and Apache, but I did want to cover these so you can see that at the end of the day, they're both web servers, they can both work as load balancers and reverse proxies, and they have very similar feature sets, but I happen to think that the configuration language for NGINX is quite a bit easier to read, so I just prefer that. And overall, it's a lightweight tool.